So I'd like to talk a little bit about cameras today. The camera in question is every single camera on the market. What I mean by that is every manufacturer has made their camera, rather it be a turret style camera like this, or a dome style, or a bullet style camera. All cameras have this inherent, I would consider it a problem. They have these pigtails, these whips, these dongles, whatever you'd like to call them. They have these on the end of them for you to connect them to, rather it be the data connection, a reset button, or a power connection. And the reason I absolutely hate this design is simply because you always have to do something with this if it's in a space where you can't hide it. And well, that might seem a little silly, but for example, if you're running this down a wall and you've got this maybe 6 or 8 feet off the ground and you're only trying to hang this camera inside of a room, well, realistically, just to run a single cable down into the camera, I hate seeing this pigtail hanging from above the camera. Basically, it's mostly an aesthetic problem. The other problem is that, for example, if you're in the same situation, you have the camera 6 or 8 feet above the ground, let's say 8 feet above the ground, there is nothing really stopping anybody from either hitting the reset button. There is nothing stopping anybody from actually unplugging the camera. Now, keep in mind, this camera actually has a nice little gland that goes over it to kind of lock it in place, but you still have this problem of these two wires hanging around that can be messed with. Now, granted, if somebody was really trying to be a much of a nuisance, that they can easily cut the wire, but to unplug a wire is a lot easier than hitting a reset, or to hit the reset button or unplugging the camera is a lot easier than cutting the wire. And if somebody cuts the wire, it can be, hey, why'd you have a lot more explaining to do than, oh, I just bumped the wire and it came undone or something like that. I know that sounds silly, but things happen. So this style of camera is also a problem with this connector, simply because you have to worry about water ingress. For example, you might get water inside this reset button. Now, this reset button, it is sealed on all sides except for this one side here. This is just a regular tactile button that you would put on a PCB. And if you actually take a quick look here, see if it'll focus on that, you can see there that all it is just molded in there. If you take apart any type of circuitry, any type of printed circuit board, and pretty much any electronic, they're going to have these buttons in there. These buttons are not waterproof. So this scares me because if enough water got in here, the camera could essentially infinitely reset itself, and I've seen that on certain manufacturers and different models of camera. The same thing is that this particular camera made by Reolink is actually PoE. There's really no reason for it to actually have a barrel connector on here for power, because it is PoE, nor does the camera actually even come with a power adapter. They expect you to provide power over Ethernet to the camera anyway. So in the market, out of all the different manufacturers, whether it be GeoVision, Dahua, Hikvision, I believe Pelco, the list goes on and on and on, of all the usual suspects of cameras. They all have this for pretty much all their cameras: dome, turret, bullet, whatever have you, even their fisheye cameras. So I'd like to introduce something a little bit different. This is an older style Axis camera. So this is the name of the manufacturer, AXIS, Axis. This camera is absolutely built like a tank, and you will pay for that. For example, this camera, when it was originally manufactured, probably cost upwards of $800 and up. Now, this is a standard def camera, but the build quality is absolutely superb. You can get different styles of this camera. For example, you could get one that's a dome style. You can get accessories like a hood, so you could actually have the dome style like this, and there'd be a little sun hood that would go on there. You can get a lot of different features for these cameras. It's not just one camera and that's all you get. You actually get accessories, or you can get different attachments for these cameras, which are really cool. The other thing is I guess I could take it or leave it. I like the turret style, right, because you can move it, and then wherever it's placed, that's it. However, you know, when you screw this down, it actually does lock it in place. The only thing is, though, is that if somebody really wanted to go up to the camera or hit it with something, it could actually bump the camera out of position. With this style, it's everything is sealed in here. If you cannot move the actual lens and sensor, they're actually locked in place. And this one's locked in place pretty hard. Actually, I can't even get it open, get it to move. Yeah, it's not moving. Anyway, there we go. Okay, so this guy, you can pan and tilt, and then you can lock it in position. It also has a roll motion, so you can also roll it depending on how you need the placement to be. The other nice feature is they've actually put this elastic strap on here, or silicone, whatever material this is, so that if the camera is hanging from a wall or a ceiling, you can actually take off the cover and it'll stay there. And it also allows you to completely disconnect it like this and put it back on. So anyway, this is a very hard metal, rather be aluminum or zinc or whatever type material it might be. And then inside, you can see here we have a bunch of different connectors. These different connectors can be assigned for different things, like for example, alarm out, so you can actually have, you know, if there's motion, if you set it up, you can actually have it go to some sort of anything you want. Everything is assignable on this, which is really nice. So you can actually, these cameras are meant to be used in a lot of different environments, and can be utilized a lot more complexly than this guy. Of course, again, you're paying the difference. So this camera right here is probably, I think, $60 or thereabouts, and you know, this is order of magnitude more. So the main reason why I'm showing you this camera, for example, is that the actual Ethernet connector is on the inside. So when you actually deploy this camera, you can actually run cable from the backside, or you can actually take off this cover right here and run it from the side. Now you're probably wondering to yourself, you know, hey, you put it in like that, what's stopping water ingress from like that? Well, this camera, you can actually get glands that will go onto this, and we'll have a gland go on the back side of this. If I was actually putting this on a wall, for example, I might put silicone around here. These are actually the mounting screws here, and then I can silicone it and then put it on the wall, and then I wouldn't really have to worry about water ingress. The same thing can be true about the side. Is you would put a gland here, and then there would actually be a cable that would go out to wherever it's running to its network connection and power connection. All depends on the situation. And there's even a little locking screw here to stop somebody from unscrewing it. But anyway, so this cable will go in here. Now, granted, this camera is huge in comparison. You know, much bigger, and it even has a fan in here. I'm assuming, you know, in the summertime to keep it cool, that sort of thing, keep some circulation going. Although it is a sealed system, so I don't know how well that's going to work. It might actually help to keep the dome from fogging up. That could be a potential. That is true with some cameras. Some of the higher end cameras, they actually have heaters and fan systems. I actually have an old camera laying around somewhere that actually had a heater, because the camera is separate. It's in this big open space to the dome or the actual, I think it was actually kind of a bullet style camera. These cameras right here, there's minimal amount of room, and the lens and the sensor are as close to the glass as possible. So there's not really a lot of room for the lens, for the glass to actually fog up. So anyway, the reason I'm showing you this is because this was the first manufacturer on the market that I know of that actually allowed you to run a cable and be able to directly plug it in without any dongle or any external wiring just hanging about. Ugly, very, very ugly. So why did I show you that? I showed you that now to show you this. Now, this has been out for a little while, but I haven't really seen anybody do much coverage on the subject itself. This is made by Ubiquiti Networks. They make a lot of networking equipment, a lot of enterprise networking equipment. For example, if you wanted to get access points for a building for Wi-Fi, or they have networking switches, they have point-to-point networking equipment, they have fiber equipment, they have loads of equipment, and they're getting into the camera market, or actually they've been in the camera market for a while. But this camera in particular has been one of their most cost-effective products for their camera lineup. This camera can be had for less than $100 US. And I really love this camera for a multitude of reasons. One, this camera right here by Reolink actually has audio. The Axis camera right here, this doesn't even have audio. It has all the features in the world, but it actually doesn't even have audio. This camera has the best microphone I have ever heard on a IP camera. Probably the best microphone on any camera, security camera that I've seen ever. It's very clear even when you have people long distance away talking at a very low tone. You can hear them. The only complaint that I've had with this camera so far is that, for example, both the Axis and the Reolink camera and any other dome or turret camera, you can point them straight down if you'd like. The other thing is that you can actually adjust the roll. This camera cannot point straight down. It's actually limited to about right there. So if you had, like, for example, a cash register or something like that, you could not have it firing straight down to see the cash register. You'd have to put it off to an angle a little bit. Also, this camera is meant to be mounted either perfectly, pretty much perfectly vertical. You can't really mount it horizontal like this, depending on how you're trying to tuck it away. But that being said, this camera fits fantastic in corners. It also has a pipe mounting attachment, so you can actually mount this onto a pole, and it looks amazing compared to if you wanted to mount, like, say, this kind of camera on a pole. It would look very awkward. You'd have to, if the pipe was actually, a 2-inch pipe and it was coming like this, you'd have this big awkward thing sticking out. And then on the back side, you would see this unless you had a plate. And it just looks very ugly. And the same can be true about this dome style camera. You've got all this big mass that you have to conceal. This camera looks totally at home on a pole, a pipe. It looks amazingly at home in a corner, in a room, in a stairwell. So why am I getting to this? This camera is the newest manufacturer. Ubiquiti is the newest manufacturer other than Axis that has thought, hey, instead of having an ugly dongle, let's just have it where you can just plug in like that. And I think this is absolutely amazing. It makes running cable so much simpler. You don't have to worry about hiding this mess. You don't have to put this is another common thing that actually drives me crazy is so many people, they actually sell external enclosures that go on the back of the camera. So bumping out, an extra at least 2 to 3 inches. You have this box that goes on the back of the camera, and it's to hide all of these wires. It's so unnecessary, and I've come victim to this where you have to put an external box, an enclosure, a case, something to hide the wires if you're in a situation where you don't want to drill another big hole in the wall. Because, for example, you would have to drill a hole big enough to fit at least this minimum. So now you've got to have a drill bit that is this big as opposed to this big. And you have to get that through it too. So you've got this, and then you've got to feed all of this through it. You know, rather if you do one, then the other, or if you're just trying to tape all this as one big wad and push it through, you have to drill the hole for that. And that's so annoying and time consuming, because now you either have to have a bigger drill, like for example, an SDS drill, a hammer drill to go through concrete or cinder block or whatever have you, or brick. It's going to take a lot longer to drill a bigger hole than it would be to drill for a smaller hole for a smaller wire. This camera, I don't have to get an external box to hide the wire. I just run the length of wire I need, and since I already drilled the hole small enough for this, I just push whatever I don't need back in the hole. I don't have to drill bigger for this big end. Now, granted, there are some shortcomings to this camera. Again, one was that you can't tilt the camera all the way straight down. However, when you're mounting it to a wall or something like that, this camera has a wide enough view that even if you put it on the wall like this, I can actually see the wall that this is mounted to when I have this camera flipped all the way down. It's a little bit more tricky when you start doing things like stairwells. Stairwells, depending on the customer, depending on the size of the stairwell, the width, the height, I will actually mount the camera in the middle to get both the ascending and descending side of the stairwell with one camera, just to save on cost. And it saves the end user from having to switch to a bunch of different cameras. This camera I've actually mounted horizontal like this to try and get both sides of the stairwell. The only downside to that is there's no adjustment for roll or anything like that. So it just becomes a little bit tricky. You can't do some of the things that I would normally be able to do with this kind of camera. However, its pluses greatly outweigh its pitfalls. It even has a little thing here for a quarter 20 bolt, so you can, if you want to even use this on a tripod, you could. Just very well thought out in that respect. The other thing that I'd like to mention is that this camera, when you're actually mounting it, you can't mount it upside down outside. You can do it inside, but the reason is just the way that this camera is designed. Water can ingress this way, and so essentially you can't mount it like this outside. The only time that you could probably do that is, like, for example, in an overhang to a doorway. Like, for example, if I wanted to mount this up in the corner in a doorway somewhere, I could do that and not really worry about it. But if it was just outside and I was just trying to get that angle, it wouldn't really work. So, for example, I like this because I can tilt down like this and I can see very close to the wall. Like this, it's close, but it's not exact because you have this little scoop here. You have the actual camera body in the way, so you can't get the same vantage on this in this orientation like you would like this. So that is essentially it. That I'm using this camera like crazy for a lot of my installs. The only time that I will use the Reolink, for example, is cost. This camera is a little bit cheaper for some customers that have a very small budget. I will go with this camera. The other reason I like this, the Reolink camera, what's nice about it is that there's another model of this camera that actually has an SD card slot, so you can actually deploy this Reolink camera in a standalone mode, which is fantastic if you have a customer that just wants one camera mounted somewhere for a specific purpose. With this, you can't do that. You have to get the recorder separate from the camera. Again, the camera is under $100, but the recorder is about $200, and then it may or may not be what the end client wants to have. Now, the other thing is that the recorder that they have for these cameras is the Unify Cloud Key, the 2nd generation. That is the new video recorder for this camera. Now, that device takes a laptop size 2.5-inch hard drive. Now, this is great because the recorder is very small, plus the recorder is also PoE, which is fantastic. It has a built-in backup battery so that it doesn't immediately shut off if the power is lost. These are all fantastic things. However, to find a laptop size hard drive, say for example, in a 4 or a 6 terabyte flavor, it's very difficult to actually find something in that range, as opposed to this, where we can actually put in an SD card for internal recording, and then you can also get the NVR that goes along with this if you so choose, which is about $300. You can put in any size drive you want because it takes the full size 3.5-inch drive. So things to weigh out when you're doing different installations. Obviously, no size fits all, but this package has been fitting a lot of my issues and a lot of my desires for having a clean, almost all-encompassing solution for probably 98% of my customers. So I highly recommend anybody that is in the market for buying cameras to definitely take a look at this camera. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is 1080 30 frames per second. This camera right here is a 4 megapixel camera, so it's a higher resolution camera, but I would almost put the resolution of this camera right alongside this one, unless you're really trying to stretch it out, zoom in and pixel peep. If you're just looking at the camera, the 1080 does just fine. The next video that I would like to do is going over the interface for the camera and the system. The actual interface for this camera, whether it be on the mobile app or on the web interface, is again second to none. It is just as good as the camera is, and what I mean by that is the overall interface is the easiest to use, most intuitive interface that you could ever wish for. And I really have to say hats off to Ubiquiti for the interface. So that will be in a up and coming video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this was a good bit of information for anybody that is an installer, or even somebody that is looking to just install cameras in their home or their office or business. Definitely would go with this camera. I would also go with the Reolink. I'd go with any manufacturer, and I've installed pretty much every manufacturer's camera under the sun, and this is by far at this current time my favorite. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. Like and comment. Talk about what you thought about the video and about the content, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.